Hi there. Today I want to go a little bit deeper with the concept, Eckhart Tolle's concept of the pain body, kind of revisit that. And I say revisit that because I have a video out where I've already talked about that. Maybe I'll put that up here. Will it be up here, this side? Either one of these sides. It'll show up. You can check it out there. My goal is to help you sort of understand the pain body a little more and how it kind of can play out in your body and in your life. And I'm going to talk about some of the shortcomings of Eckhart Tolle's pain body concept, if I may be so bold as to do that. And I want to connect you with some resources for helping you dissolve the pain body. So I'm Jay Eaker from the BioSoul Integration Center here in Louisville, Colorado, and I help people embody their soul's gifts and their soul's essence so they can share those gifts with the planet. I help them embody the wisdom that their pain has for them, and so that they can ultimately share their gifts with the planet, because the thing like our pain body kind of gets in the way of us serving and connecting with our gifts and giving our gifts. So if you end up liking this video, please click that like button and subscribe to my channel if you would. That's really helpful, and share this with anyone who might be interested or need this information. So yeah, the pain body is kind of a hard concept to understand, and that's because the pain body lives in the realm of the mind, our mind being the part of us that does all the reasoning and the thinking, and to some extent feels. And so thoughts and emotions, thoughts are largely the tools of the mind. And, everyone to some degree is like totally attached. Some people to some degree, everyone to some degree, and others to a greater degree are really attached to the thoughts that are running through their heads. Most adult humans kind of relate to the world based on what they think. I always say to people in the work that I'm doing here that, I think people, when they're angry or when they're sad or when they're happy, it's because they know that because they're thinking happy or sad or angry thoughts. We really sort of see the world a lot through the lens of our thinking intelligence and have a sort of monopoly on that. But the problem with that is that a lot of what our mind does, all of that thinking that we think is us, that we're so attached to, we think those are our opinions. We think this is our idea. We think this is what I think. A lot of that is very deeply conditioned by the collective mind. The current collective mind, it's kind of like we're soaking in this like thought, this mind field, and our brains are sort of like a antenna to pick up that information. And so we're a lot of what our mind does and a lot of the thinking that goes on has to do with this sort of like deeply conditioned. Our mind is deeply conditioned by the group mind, the collective mind, by the culture, by the field that we grew up in with our parents, our immediate family, and also by our ancestors, the people who came before us. So a lot of our thinking is sort of, conditioned by all that, and it's largely unconscious. And what that means is that we're constantly, based on what we learned early on when we're in the womb and when we're little kids, about what's safe to feel and what's okay to feel and what parts of us are okay to feel and what thoughts are okay and what's the stories that we tell ourselves, or which ones are okay and which ones aren't. So there's constantly this sort of like push-pull relationship in our minds where we're constantly trying to think and feel certain things, and then constantly pushing away other thoughts and other feelings. And that means that the mind can sort of unconsciously run our lives. We spend a lot of time in our lives kind of avoiding things and going towards other things based on this sort of deep conditioning of our mind and the thoughts therein that we picked up. And again, the pain body lives in the domain of the mind. The pain body can hijack our thoughts and thoughts and emotions to sort of keep itself alive and to keep itself fed. Eckhart Tolle says that the pain body feeds on negativity and drama. And it's hard, since we're so attached to the mind, it's hard to really understand it until we start to get some distance from it. Until we have a greater awareness, until we start to be able to observe how the mind runs our lives, until we start to be able to see, and when that's the case, then we start to be able to see the pain body in there, until we can notice, like, oh, I'm afraid, or I'm angry, is there anything, I'm able to observe the thoughts associated with that. I'm able to observe the emotions and watch them happen, and to observe, like, is there anything to be afraid right now about, really? Or is there anything to be angry about? Oh, there's not. We're starting to get some sort of distance from the mind and how it works, and consequently we start to be able to see the pain body at work. And I'll, also sort of like want to mention that the idea that the mind is really, you've heard the term body-mind or mind-body, like the mind really is the body. All that stuff is stored in our body. The mind is the body and the body is the mind. I often tend to sort of like see them as separate things, but then have moments where I realize, where I have sort of a direct experience of emotion or direct experience of pain in my body and see how it's connected to my mind. I really get how the body and the mind are the same thing. And so dysfunction and pain that's associated with the pain body can show up on all these different levels: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I thought I would sort of point out a little bit of what Eckhart Tolle says about the pain body himself. And so in The Power of Now, which was one of Eckhart Tolle's, I think his first, really well-known book, the first book that kind of launched him into, into a recognizable person, was the book The Power of Now. And in The Power of Now, he says, and I'm quoting, "As long as you are unable to access the power of now, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue of pain that lives on in you. It merges with the pain from the past, which was already there, and becomes lodged in your mind and body. This, of course, includes the pain you suffered as a child, caused by the unconsciousness of the world into which you were born. It can only exist if you unconsciously identify with it. The moment you observe it, feel its energy field within you, and take your attention into it, the identification is broken." And so that kind of reflects some of the things that I was just saying there. In one of his other books, called A New Earth, I don't have The Power of Now, but here's another of his book, A New Earth. He says some interesting things too that I want to make note of, which is that the idea that I mentioned, the pain body can kind of follow us through time. This idea that a lot of the pain body is not necessarily us. It comes from our ancestors. And Eckhart Tolle says there can be a familial pain body, stuff we pick up from our family and that's been moving through our family, a racial pain body, a national pain body, a gender-related pain body. So like women have a certain pain body, men have a certain pain body, but all of those things I just think is interesting for the time that we're in. A racial pain body, a national pain body, a gender-related pain body. Like certain racial groups are going through, something's coming to the head at this time in history. A national pain body, something, the particular issues that our nation has sort of coming to the surface. Gender-related pain body, there's a lot of gender stuff, coming to the surface right now. So I think that's just interesting to kind of relate that stuff to the emergence of and the healing of the pain body. that stuff comes to the surface, that is it's starting to become more apparent. We're starting to see it. We're starting to be able to bring our attention to it, and that starts to heal it. And I wanted to mention sort of some other concepts that are, I think, related to the pain body that, again, is designed to help you understand the pain body better. There are certain concepts that Eckhart Tolle uses, but there are other concepts in the healing, world that are kind of related to the pain body and might help you understand it more. So there's the concept of the ego, and Eckhart Tolle is always talking about how we get hypnotized by, we're in the trance of the ego. And I was even like, well, I use that word all the time, but what the heck, as a Boulderite, I use the word ego all the time, but I really was like, what? I don't actually know what that means. And that term, it comes from Sigmund Freud, and it's attributed to him. Actually, he didn't actually ever use the term because he was like, was it German or Austrian? I can't remember, but it's a translation of what he called the Das Ich. Sorry if my German or Austrian, whatever that is lame, but it literally means the I. And so, when you say, I don't know, in some charged situation in your life, like, I've had enough of this, or this is what I think, or, I'm out of here. It's the I that we're always speaking from. Again, is this sort of conglomeration of deeply conditioned thoughts and feelings and tendencies that sort of come to the surface as our thoughts through the vehicle of our mind. And we are really identified with that. On some level, we really think that's us. But again, 99%, not always, but 99% of the time, that stuff comes from the part of us that's been conditioned by the human collective mind. And again, the pain body works in the realm of the mind, and so it can hijack our thoughts to get what it wants. But that our thoughts and what we think and all the associations and all the meanings that we've put on top of each other that are included when we say, I think, that's not the most of us. That I is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and there's all of that iceberg hanging out underneath the ocean, and the foundation, which is a more spiritual part of us. And, during an awakening, that our awareness sort of shifts to include that more spiritual part of us, that bigger part of us, that part of us that includes it's a part of us that is overlapping with everything. And again, when there's sort of an awakening, our awareness shifts to sort of include that part of us, and an awakening like that can happen during a significant experience of nature, or making love, or some exhilarating, jumping out of a plane, or some trauma. I've certainly had that experience. Some trauma, and when there's an awakening like that, we start to disidentify from the I, from the ego. And when that's the case, again, that might be it could be a lasting situation. Accidents, experiences, transcendental experiences, change people on some level forever. And, we start to be able to observe when we get triggered, when our ego gets triggered and takes over, when the pain body gets triggered and takes over. And just in the noticing, there is there's a healing, there's a disidentification from the pain body that starts to happen. Because again, when we can see it, when we have awareness of it, the gig is up. The pain body lives in unconsciousness, thrives on that. And when consciousness is there, it doesn't exist, it disappears. It loses its grip on us. Another concept is the idea of the shadow. Carl Jung's shadow self, which was, he said any repressed part of ourselves could be the shadow, and we make all sorts of strange relationships. Of course, you think of things like anger and fear and guilt and shame, and obviously we want to push, we're apt to sort of push those things away, but we can also make strange relationships with things like joy and love and power. And when we've repressed a part of ourselves and have like habitually been conditioned to not look at it, to not let it in, to judge it, it becomes our shadow. And the thing is that there's some gifts to the shadow. We're split in a fundamental way. Our shadow has wisdom seen through the lens of our heart. Our shadow, again, it has wisdom for our bodies and lives, and on some level we're not a whole person if we're not integrated with our shadow. A lot in the New Age world wants to lean towards love and light all the time, but there are problems that happen on every level because the shadow is not integrated, and when our shadow is not integrated, then we're not living in our authentic self. There's also my sort of the lens that I'm working from, when I work with people, is kind of like this defended or survival sense of self. When we are born, there's a certain part of our nervous system that's online, that's really feeling into our environment, and we feel into the people around us, again, the cultures and our family and the greater culture, and we pick up on how people are doing themselves. And when we feel into them, we feel how parts of their system says, oh, this part's okay to look at, but this part isn't okay. There's this much of this anger is okay, but beyond this point it's not okay, so we got to push it away. And then we automatically adopt those ways of being because we rely on those people for our survival. So there's this instantaneous adopting of those patterns out of a perceived need to survive. There's no thinking involved. It just happens automatically. And I kind of, and so there are these disowned, dishonored parts of ourselves that we're, continually pushing away, that are kind of, life is giving us stuff to help us come into contact with those things. And we are constantly sort of like habitually pushing those things away. And yeah, those parts kind of remind me of the pain body. They're sort of like clamoring for attention. Or if we're unconscious of those disowned, dishonored parts of ourselves, they can sort of slip out when we're under-resourced, when we're triggered in some way, tired or hungry or whatever. They can sort of slip out and start to run the show. These sort of young, unintegrated, parts of ourselves that have been disowned and dishonored and haven't been given attention, they can start to run the show. And to me, that sounds a lot like the pain body as well. Some examples of the pain body, I feel like just the other day, I was looking at other people's YouTube channels, and there's a person that I sort of, as a colleague, and I'm kind of judging myself against their performance, and I see like their numbers are not as high as mine quite, and I'm like, all right, there's a part of me that's happy about that, or other way around, when they're farther ahead, or doing better, there's a part of me that's like, oh, subtly like doesn't like them. So that's the pain body. Like, what does it make sense for you to not be happy for someone like that? Just sucks. But that's the pain body in us, subtle, taking control of our lives. Another example I think of is Gollum from The Lord of the Rings, from The Hobbit. If you've seen those movies or if you've ever read those books, when you were a kid, Gollum, he's that guy that, like in the movies, he's like this creepy little guy. He's always all bent over, and he's like bald and like gray, and he's, always like, my precious, this like scary little guy, right? But dark, kind of victim-y sort of guy, little guy, and he used to be Schmiegel. He used to be this happy-go-lucky guy, this happy-go-lucky hobbit-like guy. However, Schmiegel's dark side wasn't integrated, and he found this ring, and that the ring's job is to sort of amplify our shadow, amplify our unintegrated shadow. And so there was this, over time, became this major split where Schmiegel's, shadow, his dark side, his pain body, took over. I feel like that's a good example. I want to I always think, that there are some shortcomings actually to Eckhart Tolle's concept of the pain body. Like when he talks about it, you kind of get this idea that it's like this entity inside of us that that's being, that we have to sort of get rid of, and that it's not really us, And so I guess from the perspective, from that sort of like completely self-actualized perspective of Eckhart Tolle, it's true, the pain body, the conditioned mind, the shadow, that isn't us. It's stuff that we picked up. When we came into this world, we were a blank slate, and we sort of just that stuff got imprinted on us, and we picked it up. But the thing is, in my experience, we sort of make it our own. We sort of build it into our own makeup, and there's no one that's gonna, take it away. That we have to heal it ourselves. And if there are parts of us that are, we don't constantly exist in that completely self-actualized place, most of us. And so the shadow and the pain body and all that, it's going to come to the surface, it's going to come to the awareness in layers. We might see some layer of it and start to heal and dissolve and release the grip of some layer of it, but there's always going to be a deeper layer. And if the whole of you is not in a place where you can just see the whole pain body, then we kind of have to do the work of releasing it little bit by little bit. And I think it is detrimental to have the idea that it's separate from us. It is a part of us. We've made it a part of us. And we can't really clear it or get rid of it until we actually come into relationship with it, until we sort of see it and see how it's been running our lives, and see that maybe, there are some good aspects of it. And when we can sort of fully see it, we get to sort of extract those good aspects and, and discard the parts that don't work for us. So as far as like techniques go for dissolving the pain body, I wanted to give you a little something to help dissolve the pain body. As Eckhart says, the pain body exists in time. So when we're wrapped up in the I, we're wrapped up in our mind, we are constantly telling stories about, oh, I'm afraid of this in the future, I'm worried about this in the future, or I'm resentful, there's anger about this in the past. We're kind of always responding to life based on stuff that's happened to us in the past that didn't go so well, or based on thinking about what could go wrong in the future. And so we're never actually living in the present moment. And again, the key to dissolving the pain body is to be in the present moment, because the pain body doesn't live in the present moment. And so something that Eckhart Tolle told me in this book, in the New Earth, that changed my life was, he said, keep part of your attention on your energy body at all times. That's like one of the most important things that any human could strive to do, because of its huge impact on your life forever. And you might wonder, like, how the heck do I do that? for someone who's not necessarily so apt or so used to sort of bringing their attention to their body, like how do I do that? And especially it can be hard enough just if you're meditating, or like they in Zen ashrams or whatever, it's like you meditate and then you take that out where you start to rake, so the idea is to be able to build up this awareness and be able to in daily life have a certain level of awareness all the time, and not have that diverted. But again, for the average person, it can kind of be hard to think of like, how do I keep my attention on my pain? Like, well, even what is that even? But it's very simple. It's kind of like right under our noses. So right now, close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, I want to ask you, do you have a body? The answer is probably yes. You probably know that you have a body, but how do you know? How do you know you have a body? With your eyes closed, you can't see it. Being able to see our body is a major pathway for knowing that you have a body. But there's others. If you have your eyes closed, you know you have a body still. How do you know it? Well, the answer is you feel your body, right? So there are just sort of three kind of groups of sensations that are all kind of happening together, that together give us the sensation of having a body. And there are physical sensations like pain, like the clothes on your skin, like the pressure of your butt, on the couch here, your feet on the floor. Physical sensations like that. Then there are physiological sensations like that's created by your heart beating, or your breathing, or a full bladder, etc. And then emotions cause sensations in your body. That's actually, most adult humans that are living in their heads don't realize that there's actually, those thoughts are generated by this sort of deep bed of often emotion that's coming to the surface. And since the thought pathway is so, our mind and the thought pathway is so ingrained in us, it squirts into thought, but we're not necessarily aware that there's actually sensation, there's emotions moving in our body. And so that's kind of the third group of sensations that let us know that we have a body when we're not looking, which is emotional sensations in your body. If you're happy or sad or afraid, there's actually a sensation in your body that corresponds with each of those emotions. And so these are all the things, the physical sensations, physiological sensations, and emotional sensations in your body that all together tell you that you have a body. You're feeling those. And so at any given moment, you should be able to notice at least one of those things. No matter what you're doing, you should be able to talk. You should be able to find at least, you should be able to just find at least one of those sensations at any given moment. Now, once you start trying to do that, you're going to find that that's hard. It's hard to talk and pay attention to your body at the same time. It's hard to be in a stressful situation and pay attention to your body at the same time. And so that's what like mindfulness meditation and yoga, these things like that, these are techniques that are used to help us quiet the mind and start to pay more attention to our body. And mindfulness meditation in particular is really training us to be able to sort of pay attention to what's relevant in the present moment. A lot of times we get overwhelmed by life because we're just not able to sort of track everything that's happening. We just things get stressful, and we're getting overwhelmed by the input. We can't track because there's a portion, we've spent a lot of time pushing certain things away, and when certain situations, stressful situations start to happen, those feelings that we've been pushing away, or those thoughts that we've been pushing away, they flood in. And since we have this sort of conditioned, habitual way of pushing those things away, we get overwhelmed. And so mindfulness meditation is the sort of art and the science of learning how to track those things and not be overwhelmed by them, and be able to put your attention, the sort of attention muscle gets weak and limp in us. Again, we were conditioned to notice certain things and not notice other things, go limp when other things come about. When like too much anger comes about, we go limp and we are not able to look at that or pay attention to that or whatever it is. And so it's about mindfulness meditation training is really about sort of strengthening that attention muscle and being able to discern and have your attention rest on whatever is relevant in the present moment. you know, in certain situations, a dangerous situation, maybe physical movement is important. You got to get out of the way. Or maybe in certain situations, you're in an argument with your wife and you got to think about what you feel and articulate that, you know. You know, you're taking a test. Certainly you're balancing your checkbook. You should be able to pay attention to the thoughts that are doing the math, you know. So in different situations, it's helpful to be able to pay attention to certain modes of information. But again, if we're trying to balance a checkbook and we're just overwhelmed by emotion for something that just happened, it's like you can't balance a checkbook. You just can't get life done. It happens, you know, people start having panic attacks or emotional issues, like you just can't function in life because there's all this stuff that's backed up and that's brewing that's trying to come to the surface, and we're habitually trying to push it away. So mindfulness meditation is training to do that. And I guess where a big teacher of mine was a man named Shinzen Young. And I wish I had a copy with me here, but he wrote a book called The Science of Enlightenment, which basically is a book that shows you the path to enlightenment, basically. But a big part of that is mindfulness, is learning how to pay attention to the thoughts. Notice the thoughts, notice the sensations in your body, notice the emotion. And when you're able to sort of pick those things apart, there's some amazing things that happen in your life. But also, I just wrote a book that I get to sort of promote here a little bit, because in my book is about turning pain into a portal for your transformation. And in order to do that, we have to be able to sort of differentiate different parts of the pain. Pain overwhelms us because we're not able to pay attention to the parts of it. We're not, the emotional stuff, the mental stories are all tangled up in a knot that we're not wanting to look at. But when we start to untangle that, we start to be able to extract the wisdom out of pain, and it's a portal for transformation. And so I wrote a book about that called, okay, that's not working. I wrote a book about that called If It Didn't Hurt. This is what it looks like on Amazon. If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose. And there are some simple mindfulness tools in there that you can learn and use. So, I think that's about, and help you understand. This book is real. Now, although I don't actually use the word pain body in this book, what I'm talking about in there from the perspective of the survival self that I talked about earlier, and how that actually manifests in our body, and how what's happening in our body translates into our minds and our lives, squirts into our minds and our lives. I talk all about that in that book, in If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life's Purpose. I'll put that in the description below, along with all the other books that I talked about, Eckhart Tolle's books. But although I don't use the word pain body in that book, I would say it's critical for understanding the pain body. So if you really want to understand the pain body, you might want to get that book. So just to recap, we can't really understand the pain body. This video is about understanding the pain body, and everybody wants to understand it, but if we're only in the mind, if we're only trying to understand it through thought, it's going to be impossible. The only way to understand it is to have a direct experience of ourselves as we start to disconnect, as we start to dissolve it, as we start to sort of separate ourselves from it and observe it. And there's other things, other healing work probably that you'll need to be able to do that, to sort of increase awareness and embody more of ourselves. And that could be chiropractic or somatic psychotherapy or EMDR or brain spotting or certainly meditation, mindfulness meditation, something called network chiropractic, which is the foundation for the work that I do, and bio-soul integration, which is the work that I do. Those are all things that help embody yourself and do some healing and start to observe the pain body. And on the other hand, you could just, like Eckhart Tolle says, just commit to bringing, you don't have to know anything really. You just commit to bringing your attention to the sensations in your body, and just naturally you'll start, over time, you'll start to separate from the pain body. And you know, you start to understand it and see it and start to separate from it. So, I hope you liked this video. Please, again, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. I can be found on anywhere where you find podcasts, where you listen to your podcasts. I'm at www.biosoulintegration.com, and I got a book on Amazon now, so that's cool. So again, like it, share it, pass it along to those who might be interested, and I look forward to helping you express more life, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day.